The bitter winter wind howled across the desolate countryside, slipping through the cracks of Katherine Wilson's threadbare woolen dress as she trudged along the muddy path. At 23, Katherine's youthful beauty remained undimmed despite the hardships that had befallen her. Her long golden hair, partially concealed beneath a simple linen cap, caught the rare glimpses of sunlight that broke through the gray clouds overhead. The worn fabric of her dress, once of vibrant blue but now faded to a dull gray, clung to her slender yet curved figure, the neckline frayed and hanging lower than propriety might suggest, drawing the eye to her delicate collarbone. 6 months had passed since the plague had claimed her husband, leaving Katherine alone to care for their 5-year-old son, Thomas. The same fever had ravaged the village, taking with it not only her husband but her parents and younger sister as well. With no family left and no means to pay the landowners increased rents, Katherine and Thomas had been forced from their home, surviving on the charity of neighbors who had little enough themselves. Thomas trudged alongside her, his small hand clutched in hers, his other arm wrapped around a mangy yellow dog. The dog, Finn, had appeared at their door the day after her husband's burial, as if sent by Providence to watch over them in their darkest hour. "Are we nearly there, Mother?" Thomas asked, his voice small against the wind. "Just beyond the next hill, my love," Katherine replied, though in truth, she was not entirely certain. The letter that had arrived a fortnight ago had been specific yet vague, an inheritance from a great-aunt she had never known existed. Agatha Wilson had died, without closer heirs, and somehow, through the twisted branches of family lineage, Katherine had been named the recipient of her cottage and lands. The hill crested to reveal a sight that made Katherine's heart sink. In the shallow valley below stood what must once have been a cottage, but now appeared little more than a crumbling stone hut with half its thatched roof missing. A small, weed-choked pond reflected the gray sky, and all around sprawled untended land, gone to seed and bramble. "Is this our new home?" Thomas asked, a mix of disappointment and childlike curiosity in his voice. Katherine squeezed his hand. "Yes, my sweet. It is not much, but it is ours." As they approached, Katherine noted that the cottage was in better condition than it had appeared from afar. The missing thatch was concentrated on one side, but the stone walls were solid, the wooden door weathered but whole. A small vegetable garden, overgrown but not dead, hugged one wall, and a humble chicken coop stood empty but intact behind the cottage. Inside, the air was stale but dry. A crude hearth dominated one wall, and what little furniture remained, a table, 2 stools, a bed frame with a straw mattress, was dusty but serviceable. What caught Katherine's eye, however, was the small collection of clay pots and glass jars arranged on a rough-hewn shelf. They contained dried herbs, powders, and substances she could not identify. Great-aunt Agatha must have been a healer, Katherine murmured to herself. Thomas had already released Finn, who was enthusiastically exploring their new home, sniffing at corners and wagging his tail. The boy followed the dog's example, peering into cupboards and under the bed. The first week passed in a blur of cleaning and repairing. Katherine patched the roof with what materials she could gather, scrubbed the floors and walls, and cleared the choked garden to reveal hardy winter vegetables that had survived neglect. They ate simply, turnip soup, wild onions, and the occasional rabbit that Finn surprisingly proved adept at catching. It was on the 8th day that Thomas's persistent questions about the cottage's former occupant prompted Katherine to search for any personal effects her great-aunt might have left behind. "Did she have toys, Mother? Was she a witch?" Old Martha in the village said all women who live alone are witches. "She was no witch, Thomas," Katherine replied, though in truth, she knew nothing of the woman whose home they now occupied. She was likely a wise woman who knew the uses of plants and herbs. That evening, after Thomas had fallen asleep on the straw mattress they now shared, Katherine examined the herbs and mixtures on the shelf more closely. Among them, she found a small leather-bound book, its pages yellow with age. Inside were handwritten recipes, not for food, but for salves, tinctures, and remedies. For burns and scalds, read one entry. Comfrey root, crushed and mixed with goose fat. To ease a woman's monthly pains, read another. dried raspberry leaf, brewed as tea. Katherine turned the pages, with growing fascination. Here was knowledge, practical, valuable knowledge that could perhaps provide them with a means of survival. The following morning, Thomas and Finn raced outside to play, while Katherine studied the book more carefully. Many of the ingredients were familiar, herbs that grew wild in the countryside or could be cultivated in a garden. Others were more exotic, things she had never heard of, with notes on where they might be purchased from traveling merchants. A knock at the door startled her from her reading. Outside stood a broad-shouldered man dressed in the finer clothes of a merchant or a lesser nobleman. His beard was neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Good day to you," he said, removing his hat. "I am Jonathan Lowell, from the next parish. I had heard that Agatha Wilson's cottage had found a new occupant." Katherine, acutely aware of her worn dress and the cottage's humble appearance, curtsied slightly. "Katherine Wilson, sir. Agatha was my great-aunt, though I never knew her." Jonathan Lowell's eyes traveled over her figure in a way that made Katherine want to pull her shawl tighter, though she resisted the urge. She would not show discomfort to this stranger. A shame. Agatha was known throughout these parts for her skill with herbs and remedies. Many came to her for help when physicians and priests failed them. His gaze shifted to the interior of the cottage visible behind her. "I had heard she possessed certain recipes of great value. I would be interested in purchasing them, should you find them among her belongings." Katherine thought of the book she had just been reading. "I am afraid I have found nothing of value, sir. Just a few dried herbs and empty jars." Jonathan's smile did not reach his eyes. "Perhaps you have not looked closely enough. I would be willing to pay handsomely, enough for you to move to the town, perhaps. This isolated cottage is hardly a suitable place for a young woman and child alone." "We are managing well enough," Katherine replied, her voice firmer than she felt. "But I thank you for your concern." After more pleasantries that felt oddly threatening, Jonathan Lowell departed, promising to return in a week to see if she had found anything of interest. As Katherine watched him ride away, Finn growled low in his throat. "I share your feelings," she murmured to the dog. That night, unable to sleep, Katherine reread the recipe book by candlelight. Most of the remedies were for common ailments, coughs, fevers, wounds, women's complaints. But toward the back, the writing changed, becoming older, more formal, the language sometimes difficult to decipher. These recipes contained unusual ingredients and promised more extraordinary results: to restore youth to aging skin, to ensure a man's devoted love, to grant dreams of prophecy. Katherine closed the book, troubled. Was this why Jonathan Lowell had come? Did he believe her great-aunt possessed magical formulas? She was not superstitious, but neither was she foolish enough to dismiss what she did not understand. The next morning, Thomas came running into the cottage, his face flushed with excitement. "Mother, Finn has found something. Come see." Katherine followed her son outside to where Finn was digging enthusiastically at the base of the cottage's western wall, where the stone foundation met the earth. "Stop that, Finn," Katherine called, fearing the dog might undermine the wall. But as she drew closer, she saw that Finn had exposed something, a small, flat stone that looked different from the others, smoother and slightly raised. Kneeling beside the dog, Katherine brushed away the dirt and realized the stone was not part of the foundation at all, but a separate piece fitted precisely into a gap. With trembling fingers, she worked at the edges until the stone came loose, revealing a small cavity behind it. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Katherine withdrew it carefully and unwrapped it to find another book, older and more worn than the first, and a small wooden box. The book's pages were filled with the same handwriting as the latter part of the recipe book, formulas and instructions in that same archaic language. The box contained several small glass vials of powders and liquids, their contents still preserved despite their age, each labeled with symbols that matched those in the hidden book. "Treasure?" Thomas asked hopefully. "Knowledge," Katherine replied, which to her mind amounted to the same thing. That night, after Thomas was asleep, Katherine studied both books together and realized they were companion volumes, one containing common remedies, the other more esoteric formulations. But they were not magic in the sense that Jonathan Lowell might have believed. They were science, alchemy perhaps, but grounded in a deep understanding of nature's properties. One recipe in particular caught her attention, a salve for healing wounds that contained honey, certain herbs, and a substance called bread mold that the book claimed would prevent festering. Katherine had seen bread mold often enough, but had never imagined it might have healing properties. The next day, gathering her courage, Katherine prepared the salve according to the instructions. The process was precise, requiring specific measurements and timing. By evening, she had produced a small jar of pale green ointment with a clean, herbal scent. Her opportunity to test it came sooner than expected. 2 days later, a frantic knocking at her door revealed a young woman from the nearest farm, her arms cradling a wailing child with a badly burned hand. "Please," the woman begged, "I have heard you are Agatha's kin. Do you know aught of healing? The physician will not come for days, and I fear my son will lose his hand to the burn." Katherine hesitated only a moment before bringing them inside. She cleaned the burn carefully with boiled water, then applied her salve generously, wrapping the hand in clean linen. She sent them home with instructions to keep the bandage clean and to return the following day. That night, she barely slept, worrying that she had done more harm than good. But when the woman returned with her son the next day, the difference was remarkable. The angry red skin had calmed, the blisters had not worsened, and the boy could move his fingers without screaming in pain. "It is a miracle," the mother whispered, tears in her eyes. "Not a miracle," Katherine replied. "Just knowledge preserved by a wise woman." Word spread quickly. Within a week, 3 more villagers had come to her door seeking remedies: a man with an infected cut, a woman with a persistent cough, an elderly farmer with joints so painful he could barely walk. Katherine consulted her Greytance books and prepared treatments for each, accepting payment in eggs, wool, or labor to repair her cottage. When Jonathan Lowell returned as promised, Katherine was ready for him. She met him at the door, Finn at her side, her posture straight and confident despite her worn clothing. "Have you reconsidered my offer?" he asked, his tone suggesting he expected compliance. "I have not found the recipes you seek," Katherine replied truthfully, for she did not know exactly what he was looking for. "But I have found my Greytance knowledge of healing, which I intend to continue in her tradition." Jonathan's expression darkened. "Those formulas belong to me by right. Agatha Wilson was merely their custodian, not their creator." "And how came you to have a right to them?" Katherine asked. "They were created by my grandfather, a physician to King Henry himself. Agatha stole them when she was employed in his household, and fled here to profit from his work. I have spent years tracking down his stolen knowledge." Katherine did not believe him. The books were written in a woman's hand, and the oldest sections dated back far beyond King Henry's reign. "If you wish to present your claim to the magistrate, you are welcome to do so. But I have found nothing matching your description." Jonathan's face flushed with anger. "You are playing a dangerous game, Widow Wilson. These are not peaceful times for women who meddle with herbs and potions. One word in the right ear about witchcraft, and all you have inherited will burn with you atop it." The threat hung in the air between them. Katherine felt cold fear wash through her, but kept her expression neutral. "I heal with God's plants and clean bandages, Master Lowell. There is no witchcraft in cleanliness and knowledge. The priest himself brought his sister to me yesterday for a remedy for her headache." This was true. The local priest, a practical man more concerned with his parishioners' well-being than with hunting imagined devils, had indeed sought Katherine's help. Seeing that threats would not sway her, Jonathan changed tactics. "Name your price, then. Every woman has one." "The price is that you leave us in peace," Katherine replied. "I have no quarrel with you, Master Lowell, nor do I wish for one." After Jonathan departed, his threats still echoing in her mind, Katherine made a decision. That night, she carefully copied several pages from both books, focusing on the most practical and valuable remedies, then resealed the original books and the box of ingredients in their hiding place. If Jonathan Lowell returned with authorities, he would find nothing incriminating. As winter gave way to spring, Katherine's reputation as a healer grew. People came from increasingly distant villages, seeking her remedies. She expanded her garden to grow more medicinal herbs, traded for ingredients she couldn't cultivate, and even hired a local boy to help with the heavier work. Thomas thrived in their new home, playing with the children from nearby farms and helping his mother gather herbs. Finn remained their loyal guardian, growling whenever strangers approached, and somehow always knowing which visitors came with good intentions and which did not. One such visitor arrived on a warm day in late spring, an elderly woman leaning on a walking stick, her face deeply lined but her eyes bright with intelligence. She introduced herself simply as Margaret, a friend of Agatha's from many years past. "I have come to see what has become of my old friend's legacy," she said, accepting a cup of herbal tea from Katherine. "I see it has found worthy hands." Margaret spent the afternoon sharing stories of Agatha, how she had indeed worked in a noble household, not as a servant, but as an herbalist and midwife. How she had fled not as a thief, but as a protector of ancient women's knowledge that certain powerful men wished to control or destroy. "The book you found was not stolen," Margaret explained. "It has been passed down through a line of women healers for generations. Agatha was its guardian in our time, as you are now." "But Jonathan Lowell claims—" Margaret made a dismissive gesture. Jonathan Lowell's grandfather was one of those who sought to claim our knowledge as his own. He stole several formulas from Agatha's predecessor and published them as his discoveries. When Agatha realized he meant to take the entire collection, she fled with the books to protect them. "Then the recipes are not magical?" Katherine asked. Margaret smiled. "What is magic but science we do not yet understand? The books contain knowledge gathered over centuries by observant women, which plants heal, which harm, how the body responds to different treatments. Some of the oldest remedies may seem magical because their workings are mysterious to us, but all come from the natural world." Before departing, Margaret taught Katherine how to prepare several of the more complex remedies, including one that had successfully treated childbed fever in many women when physicians had abandoned them as lost causes. "Use your knowledge wisely," Margaret cautioned. "Heal when you can, harm never, and choose carefully who you trust with these secrets." Summer brought prosperity to Katherine's small holding. Her garden flourished. She acquired 3 goats for milk and cheese, and the chicken coop was full once more. The cottage roof was fully repaired, and she had earned enough from her remedies to purchase proper clothes for herself and Thomas. Though her dress was still simple, befitting a country healer rather than a wealthy woman, it was new and well-made, the neckline modest yet flattering to her youthful figure. She no longer looked like a destitute widow, but a woman of purpose and modest means. Jonathan Lowell returned once more in midsummer, this time accompanied by a stern-faced man he introduced as a representative of the county magistrate. Katherine received them calmly, offering hospitality as was proper. "Master Lowell has made concerning allegations," the official stated after declining her offer of refreshment. "He claims you are practicing physique without license and possibly engaging in forbidden arts." "I make simple remedies from herbs and honey, sir," Katherine replied. "For burns, coughs, and minor ailments that the physician is too busy or too distant to treat. I make no claim to practice physique, only to help my neighbors with God's plants as women have done since Eve." She invited them to inspect her garden and the shelf of clearly labeled remedies. The magistrate's man seemed satisfied, particularly when the local priest arrived during their inspection and vouched for Katherine's character and the effectiveness of her cough syrup on his own persistent winter ailment. Jonathan Lowell was forced to retreat, his claims unsupported. As he mounted his horse to leave, he leaned down and spoke quietly to Katherine. "This is not ended. Those books contain formulas worth a king's ransom to the right buyer. I will have them." Katherine merely smiled and wished him safe travels. That evening, as Thomas played with Finn in the garden, Katherine sat with the recipe books, both the common remedies and the more ancient knowledge. She had been systematically working through them, testing and refining the formulas, sometimes improving them with her own observations. One recipe had particularly intrigued her, a treatment for the sweating sickness that had claimed so many lives in recent decades. The formula was complex, requiring precise preparations and ingredients that worked together in ways she did not fully understand, but the book claimed it had saved many during a previous outbreak. Katherine had prepared a small quantity, storing it in carefully sealed jars, praying it would never be needed, but unwilling to lose such potentially valuable knowledge. Her foresight proved providential sooner than expected. In early autumn, rumors reached their village of a new outbreak of sweating sickness in the larger town 20 miles distant. Within days, the first cases appeared in their own parish, a merchant who had recently returned from the town, then his family, then neighbors. The physician from the town had himself fallen ill, and the local barber surgeon had fled in fear. The priest, though brave, could offer only prayers and comfort to the dying. In desperation, families turned to Katherine. With trembling hands, she retrieved her prepared remedy and consulted the ancient book once more to confirm the dosage and application. The formula was to be taken internally as a bitter tea and also applied as a poultice to draw out the fever. Katherine treated the merchant's youngest daughter first, a girl of 7 who lay burning with fever, her nightgown soaked with the characteristic sweat that gave the disease its name. Throughout the night, Katherine bathed the child with cool water, administered the remedy, and applied the poultices, all while instructing the mother in the techniques. By morning, the girl's fever had broken. Within 2 days, she was sitting up and asking for food. The rest of the family, treated at the first signs of illness, recovered more quickly than the girl, who had been furthest advanced in the disease. Word spread like wildfire. Katherine worked without rest for 2 weeks, treating the sick, preparing more of the remedy, and teaching others how to apply it. Not all survived. Those too far gone before treatment or weakened by age or prior illness sometimes slipped away despite her efforts, but many more lived than would have without her intervention. When the sickness had passed, leaving their parish with far fewer deaths than neighboring villages, Katherine found herself no longer viewed with suspicion or merely tolerated as a herbwoman. She was respected, consulted, invited to the homes of even the wealthier families. One crisp autumn evening, as Katherine sat by her hearth recording her observations on various treatments in a new book of her own creation, a knock came at her door. Outside stood a well-dressed older man she recognized as the physician from the town, now recovered from his own bout with the sweating sickness. "Mistress Wilson," he said formally, "I have come to speak with you about your remedies." Katherine invited him in with some trepidation, wondering if he had come to accuse her of encroaching on his domain. Instead, he surprised her. "I have interviewed many who recovered under your care and examined your preparations. Your knowledge of herbs and their application surpasses that of many who claim greater learning." He paused, seemingly uncomfortable with what he had come to say. I wish to propose an arrangement. I cannot be everywhere at once, and there are many ailments for which my university training has provided inadequate remedies. Would you consider sharing your knowledge? In return, I could teach you what I know of anatomy and the new medical discoveries from the continent. Katherine was momentarily speechless. "You wish to learn from me? A woman with no formal education?" The physician smiled ruefully. "I wish to learn from the woman who saved half our parish while I lay helpless with fever. The source of wisdom matters less than its efficacy, does it not?" Their arrangement proved beneficial to both. The physician, Dr. James Lawton, brought Katherine books and instruments she could never have obtained on her own. She shared with him the practical remedies from both of Agatha's books, though she kept the most ancient and powerful formulas to herself, honoring Margaret's warning about choosing her confidants carefully. Winter came again, but this time Katherine and Thomas faced it in comfort. The cottage was snug and well-provisioned, with food stored for the cold months and firewood stacked high against the walls. Katherine had hired a local widow to help with household tasks and to watch Thomas when she was called away to treat the sick. One snowy evening, as Katherine sat teaching Thomas his letters, for she was determined he would be educated, another knock came at their door. Katherine opened it to find Jonathan Lowell once more, but changed from their last meeting. His fine clothes were travel-stained, his face haggard. "I have come to make peace," he said, his voice lacking its former arrogance. and to beg your help. Katherine allowed him inside but kept Finn between them, the dog watching the visitor warily. My daughter lies ill with a wasting disease that no physician can cure, Jonathan explained, his voice breaking. I have consulted doctors in London and even brought one from Paris at ruinous expense. None can help her. They say she will not see the spring. And you believe I can help? Katherine asked cautiously. I believe the knowledge you possess, the ancient remedies I sought so aggressively, might contain something the physicians with their bleedings and purgatives do not know. He met her eyes directly. I was wrong to threaten you, wrong to claim what was not mine. I offer my sincere apology and whatever payment you require. Please help my child if you can. Katherine studied him closely, searching for deception and finding only a father's desperation. I will examine your daughter, she said finally. I promise nothing beyond that. The next day, Katherine traveled to Jonathan's home, a substantial manor house that spoke of his considerable wealth. His daughter, Elizabeth, was 13, painfully thin, with a persistent cough and recurring fevers that left her weaker each time. After a careful examination and many questions, Katherine suspected consumption, a disease notoriously difficult to treat. But one of Agatha's most ancient recipes described a treatment specifically for the wasting cough that consumes the young. It required rare ingredients, precise preparation, and months of careful administration. I can try to help her, Katherine told Jonathan, but the treatment is long, and I cannot promise success. Anything, he replied. Whatever it costs, whatever it requires. Katherine began Elizabeth's treatment that very day, preparing the first stage of the remedy and leaving detailed instructions with the girl's nurse. She would need to return weekly to monitor progress and adjust the formula as needed. As winter deepened, Katherine divided her time between her own cottage and Jonathan's manor, where Elizabeth showed slow but steady improvement. The girl's fevers became less frequent, her cough less severe, and by midwinter, she had regained some weight and color. During these visits, Katherine came to understand Jonathan Lowell better. He showed her his library, which contained many medical and alchemical texts, including some written by his grandfather. He was brilliant but ruthless, Jonathan admitted. He believed all knowledge should belong to educated men, not scattered among common folk who couldn't properly understand it. When Agatha refused to surrender her books to him, he became obsessed with obtaining them, a quest I inherited along with his property. And now? Katherine asked. Jonathan looked thoughtful. Now I believe knowledge belongs to those who will use it wisely, regardless of their station or gender. My grandfather would be appalled. By spring, Elizabeth was well enough to walk in the gardens. Her full recovery would take many more months, but the worst danger had passed. In gratitude, Jonathan offered Katherine a substantial sum of money. I cannot accept such wealth for doing what any healer would do, Katherine protested. Then accept it as reparation for my threats and harassment, Jonathan countered. Or as an investment in your work. With such funds, you could build a proper stillroom, purchase rare ingredients, perhaps even take on apprentices to ensure this knowledge is not lost again. Put that way, Katherine could not refuse. The money would secure Thomas's future education and allow her to help many more people than she could in her current circumstances. As the second spring in her inherited cottage bloomed around her, Katherine stood in her garden, watching Thomas and Finn play among the herb beds. The cottage had been expanded with a new wing specifically designed for her healing work, with shelves for her remedies and a stone table for their preparation. The hidden books remained safely concealed, but their knowledge lived on in Katherine's practice and in the new volume she was creating, combining her great-aunt's wisdom with her own observations and Dr. Lawton's scientific approach. People now came from as far as London to consult the miracle healer of Wilson Cottage, bringing complex cases and generous payment. Katherine treated rich and poor alike, charging the wealthy substantial fees that allowed her to help those without means for free. She had taken on 2 apprentices, young women with keen minds and gentle hands who showed aptitude for the healing arts. One day, she would share Agatha's most precious secrets with them, ensuring the ancient knowledge would survive for another generation. That evening, as the setting sun cast long shadows across her thriving lands, Katherine sat at her table, a fresh page before her, and began to write the introduction to what would become her life's work, a comprehensive guide to herbal healing that combined ancient wisdom with new discoveries. At the top of the page, she carefully inscribed, "The Wilson Compendium of Healing Arts, being a collection of remedies both ancient and modern, gathered and refined through observation and practice, dedicated to all who seek to ease suffering through God's natural gifts." What had seemed a worthless inheritance, a crumbling cottage with hidden secrets, had transformed not only Katherine's life, but the lives of countless others. Through tragedy had come purpose, through loss had come renewal, and through an ancient book hidden in a cottage wall had come a legacy that would endure for generations to come.